I call balls and strikes as they are. Second umpire said, no, I don't call balls and strikes as they are. I call them as I see them. The third umpire said, I neither call balls and strikes as they are, nor do I call them as I see them. They ain't nothing until I call them. Three umpires, 3 points of view. The first umpire says, there's an objective strike zone that exists outside of me. The second umpire says, the strike zone is for me to interpret. The third umpire says, there is no strike zone. I make up the strike zone.
Well, the third umpire was a quantum physicist.
Look, quantum physicist. That'd be that's great.
Because that is the most concise statement of quantum physics that I've ever heard.
Okay. But the point being, as it relates to truth, umpire one says, truth is objective. It stands outside of ourselves, whether I agree with it or not. Umpire two basically is a soft relativist. There's truth, but I interpret it as I see it. The third umpire is a hard relativist. He says, I create the truth. So this forum, which is a first in a series called Veritas First, Veritas meaning truth, truth first. Isn't it interesting that as Pilate was there with Jesus, as Jesus was under arrest, Jesus said, I came to testify to the truth. It's about truth. And in our day and age, when we have seen modernism and postmodernism really affect society, that understanding of the truth is crucial. What point of view do we use when we think of the truth? Now, 20% of the world claims no religious affiliation. Not all are atheists, but there is a significant drift in that direction in Western civilization. And you will see set afoot in Western civilization the likes of Richard Dawkins, the late Christopher Hitchens, and Sam Harris promote a kind of atheism that isn't necessarily new in content, but I think certainly in approach. Because in 2002, there were a total of 2,000 marchers gathered at the mall in Washington, D.C. for the first ever Godless Americans March, sporting signs saying, God is a fairy tale, or religion kills, and making statements like, we godless Americans are everywhere. We are your husbands and friends. We work for corporations. We comprise 14% of the population. Now fast forward to 2012. And 10,000 gathered at a rally in Washington, D.C. And the number of people with no claim to a particular religious belief is around 16%. Could be more. That's not to say that the entire 16% are atheist or agnostic, but it does reflect the number of people who are non-affiliated to a specific faith. So this is a significant factor in society that must be acknowledged, faced, and answered. Will Durant, popular historian, posed the question of our day: can man live without God? Philosopher G.K. Chesterton said that to believe in the non-existence of God would be analogous to waking up in the morning, looking in the mirror, and seeing nothing. See, we are made in his image. Therefore, every human being has intrinsic worth. We stand out because of it as moral beings capable of and responsible for making moral decisions. That distinguishes us uniquely from the rest of creation. William Lane Craig put it this way: when a lion kills a zebra, it kills the zebra. It doesn't murder the zebra. When a great white shark forcibly copulates with a female, it forcibly copulates with her. It doesn't rape her. For none of these actions is forbidden or obligatory. There is no moral dimension to these actions. But when Jodi Arias killed her lover, we called it murder. As gruesome as crimes of passion can be, we underestimate the impact of crimes from logic. The crime of passion by Jodi Arias was heinous. But what about the crime from logic in Mao's Red China, Pol Pot's Cambodia, Stalin's Soviet Union? And can't we include the Third Reich, who practically applied the atheism of Friedrich Nietzsche far more than the alleged application to the scriptures, which in fact they tried to destroy, starting with the Old Testament. Viktor Frankl, Survival of the Holocaust, said, "I'm absolutely convinced that the gas chambers of Auschwitz and Treblinka were ultimately prepared at the desks and lecture halls of nihilistic scientists and philosophers." A sign on a wall in one of those gas chambers reads, "I freed Germany from the stupid and degrading fallacies of conscience and morality. We will train young people before whom the world will tremble. I want young people capable of violence, imperious, relentless, and cruel." Who said it? Adolf Hitler. How illogical is it for the belief in the non-existence of God to lumber down a path of coldly calculating the murder of masses? Fyodor Dostoevsky, in Brothers Karamazov, wrote that if God does not exist, everything is permissible. And aren't we seeing things being permitted at a scale in our culture unlike days previous? Alexander Solzhenitsyn, the well-known Russian dissident, remembered growing up hearing his grandfather say as he paced the floor exasperated, "We have forgotten God." Then when he came to America to speak at Harvard in the 1970s, Alexander Solzhenitsyn was booed in response. William Provine, atheist biology professor at Cornell University, said, "There are no gods, no purposes, no goal-directed forces of any kind. There is no life after death. When I die, I'm absolutely certain that I'm going to be dead. That's the end for me. There is no ultimate foundation for ethics, no meaning to life, and no free will for humans either." But isn't that consistent with what he believes about the non-existence of God? Richard Dawkins said, "The universe we observe has precisely the properties we would expect if there is, at bottom, no design, no purpose, no evil, no good, nothing but blind, pitiless indifference." Ravi Zacharias engaged in a conversation on an airplane with a Dutch Christian woman who rescues babies. This woman, the night before, rescued an 18-month-old baby being sexually molested by a man under the influence of snake's blood and alcohol. And Ravi Zacharias would say, "And Richard Dawkins says that there's no evil?" See, there's four major questions. Those four major questions are: origin, where did I come from? Purpose, does my life have meaning? Morality, what is right and what is wrong? And how is that determined? Fourth question, destiny. What happens after I am dead? Now, we're not saying, you won't hear Jeff say it, you won't hear me say it. We're not saying atheists are immoral. In fact, some are much more moral than some who claim to believe in the existence of God. But rather, we are asking, why are they moral? And how is that morality consistent with the answers to the four great questions of origin, morality, purpose, and destiny? People are under the assumption that only the Christians can be asked the questions, but the questions ought to go both ways and for both sides to answer. Friedrich Nietzsche, predicted two things in the 20th century. Number one, the 20th century would be the bloodiest century ever. And number two, that universal madness would break out. Ironically, he died in 1900. And I think the words of a poem by Wordsworth fits. We poets in our youth in gladness, but thereof in the end becomes despondency and madness. It was interesting. He was committed to an insane asylum during the last years of his life. But he would have moments of sanity. And in those moments of sanity, you know what he would do? Quote scripture. He would quote scripture, recalling the days when he grew up being trained in the scripture. Irrationality leads away from God and to atheism. Reason does not lead us to God as much as God leads us to reason. Rationality does not lead us to God as much as God leads us to rationality. So come, as the Bible says, let us reason together. And at this time I'm going to have Jeff share things that he has written about.
Well, I'm a pastor like Mel. I'm not a professional philosopher. I went to college and that was my major in college, so I enjoyed exploring the deep questions. And if you've been a part of our culture for the last 10, 15 years, you've seen on TV quite a bit. You hear on radio and the internet what is called the new atheists. And that is a small group of men who go all over the world and talk about why it is so great to not believe in God. And they are really evangelistic in their approach. A very unusual approach to the philosophy of atheism, because atheism has been around for ages and ages and ages. There have been Greek philosophers who were atheists. But today, there is a small group of people, high-profile people like Richard Dawkins and Christopher Hitchens, the late Christopher Hitchens, and others, who actually are energetic and enthusiastic about atheism. And it struck me one day while I was watching television on the Discovery Channel or National Geographic or one of the documentary stations. You see an expert testimony or witness called on some scientific matter or some matter of philosophy, and it's usually one of the new atheists that they call and have them explain something. And it struck me, to my way of thinking, there shouldn't be any excitement, any enthusiasm, any gladness in expounding atheism. And it got me to thinking, and a few years back I put together a talk called The Three Most Shocking Beliefs of Atheists. I have the little booklet here today, and they're over there. And I put together three messages, but the first one was the shocking beliefs of atheism. Because a lot of people don't realize what the implications of atheism are. What are the implications of atheism? Not how you can make it sound good because Richard Dawkins gets all enthused about atheism. But what are the implications of atheism? What does it really mean to believe in atheism? And so I want to just list 3 things, and I want you to correct me if I'm wrong. If you see or hear anything that I say that is not 100% accurate or consistent or logical, I would like for you to raise up your hand and say, I object, and then explain to me why what I'm saying is not consistent. So I want to just use logic and reason and work out the implications of atheism and show you some shocking implications that come with atheism. Now, the first shocking belief of atheism is that life has no ultimate meaning or purpose. We just heard a quote from William Provine, who basically said the same thing. He says the implications of atheism, one of them, the implications is that there is no ultimate meaning and purpose in life. Now, I see a hand.
I don't see why you should say that's shocking.
That there is no ultimate meaning and purpose in life.
Right.
The shocking part is that most people don't think through the implications to that degree. Now, I heard Richard Dawkins once in a discussion with someone who faced this objection, and he says, the person actually put it a little different. He says, if you're a consistent atheist, you don't have anything ultimately to look forward to in the future. Based on the implications, what we just heard, some of the quotes you gave about when you're dead, and that's the end of it all. Okay, so you don't have anything ultimately long-term, future-oriented to look forward to, because what you're looking forward to is your grave, and that's the end of everything. Okay, now Richard Dawkins says, no, that's not true. He said, I'm looking forward to, just in a few hours, a very wonderful lunch. And I can't wait to eat that lunch. And so, yeah, I see your hand there. So let me make my point, and I'll go to you. And so his counter to that was he can have these temporary enjoyments or anticipations or hope. He can have these temporary hopes. He has a hope that he's going to have a great lunch in a couple hours. So he's looking forward to that, see? So he does look forward to the future. But I would say to you, that's not what we're talking about. We're talking about a future hope, long-term hope, and we're also talking about a future meaning, meaning that my life in the grand scheme of things counts for something more than just the immediate, specific particulars of my life right now. Yes?
Well, I have a question for you. I was going to say something else, but you just said, how long is your life going to go on after? Forever?
Exactly.
What are you looking forward to?
I'm looking forward to
You have no idea, do you?
endless existence, endless happy existence, according to the Christian scripture. And that is a great thing to anticipate, where if you're an atheist, you don't have that to look forward to. Yes, go ahead.
I was going to say, which Christian scripture? Some Christians believe when you die, you are dead. They're waiting for a resurrection. Other Christians believe that when they die, they go directly to heaven. Other Christians believe that they go into, a limbo state. Purgatory. Which one are we talking here?
Well, let's skip over whatever happens in between. How about long-term, forever, eternal? And all Christians, I think, agree that heaven awaits us, and we have an infinite happiness to look forward to. That's the whole thing about Pascal's wager. You have an endless happiness future that's calling you. Now, if you're an atheist, forget about that. That's exactly not what my point is, though. My point is that life has no ultimate meaning or purpose. But we did get off a little bit on the ultimate part, and that's okay. But let me steer back. Meaning and purpose. What gives something a meaning and a purpose? It's the context in which it is placed. And if you take human existence and put it on planet Earth with no meaning or context or position in relationship to something greater, life has no meaning. And that's what an atheist must say, ultimately, that life as we know it on this planet has no ultimate meaning and purpose. Is that not true? That's true.
Well, I don't dispute your conclusion. I just disputed your judgment of it as, your personal judgment of it as shocking, because it's not a necessary or universal judgment.
That's right. I mean, if you think that that is okay, if you're okay with
that.
that.
It's not the same thing. There's not, it's not a black and white situation. It doesn't either have to be okay or shocking. It can be something else.
I guess I would qualify it, it's shocking from a majority, 90-some% of all people believe in God. And so when you say that life has no meaning and purpose, it would be a shocking thing to most people. I guess that would be the qualification, yes.
Well, going back to the one point where you were saying that a Christian person has this hope, this long-term view in life, and I understand that, but I also see an irresponsibility in that type of thinking among people that have that kind of thinking. Simply because they say, well, I don't need to do anything because God will take care of it. Or, I don't need to do this because I'm looking forward to this instead of being responsible for the life we have right now here on this planet.
That is a temptation, and I know Karl Marx was a critic of that aspect of religion. What was his quote? Opiate of the people. So he criticized that, and he said people are not attending to their business here on earth because of their heavenly hope. Yes.
Point for you, my apparent atheist friend, co-agreeer over here, is presenting a teleological argument, something you Christians are often very guilty of also. I mean, it's an error in logic. It's really beside the point.
Well, his point is valid, and I concede that point, that there is a temptation, if you believe in eternal life,
But that has nothing to do with whether it's true or false.
Right, it has nothing to do whether it's true or false, but there is a temptation to neglect, and it has happened, and it does happen today. But the point being, the shocking belief of atheism, number one, is that there is no ultimate meaning and purpose in life. Now, if you can live with that, and that doesn't bother you, if you can come to terms with that belief of atheism, that, oh, it's okay, my life doesn't have any long-term ultimate meaning, I'm only here for a short time, and that's fine. If you're fine with that, then you would be a very comfortable atheist. Now, the second belief that I believe is shocking, that a lot of people don't realize, and I think that they don't, the new atheists don't tell people these things right out bluntly, but the second shocking belief is that there is no ultimate right or wrong, no ultimate grounding for morality or ethics. Now, this is what William Provine said again, and he's exactly 100% true. If you do not believe in any transcendent source of values in life, then you have no basis for judging something really right or really wrong. You can say, I think that that's wrong, I think that that's right, but you can't really say it's really wrong and shame on you for doing it. You ought to say, well, I don't feel that that's the right way. Go ahead.
Well, I find that interesting that you're a Christian, you talk about morality, and it has to be absolute. But I believe your book, the Bible, came from man ultimately anyway, so they created right and wrong, and some of those things you've thrown to the side because they weren't so right. And we're still throwing some things to the side because we don't think they're so right. Slavery, that's a big one for me. I mean, do you accept that now? Should we have slaves?
Well, you're talking
gives you an
about-
definition of how to treat slaves.
I think you're basically trying to make a presentation that the Bible teaches or commands slavery.
It justifies slavery.
The Bible is not concerned primarily about slavery and form of government and all kinds of issues.
Owning slaves.
It doesn't say that it doesn't command people to own slaves, and it doesn't tell them
Tells them
to.
how to treat slaves. Right.
The whole thing of slavery is far, way down on the whole
you say so
list
now.
That's the
agenda.
problem.
It never was a major thing in the Bible.
That's the problem.
And so, well, the Bible does not address every topic. And that's frustrating for us because we want it to. We move along in history and the Bible doesn't say something about this, or it does say something, but it doesn't treat it the way the value that we would give it. The Bible has its own agenda, and so we need to read the Bible for its agenda, not come at it and judge it because it doesn't have our agenda. Go ahead.
Well, I understand where you're coming from on this, because I was in your same position at one time. But when you talk about reading the Bible, whose interpretation? I mean, there was a time in this country where the white people thought it was morally right because of what they felt the Bible taught to have slaves, to treat the black people the way they treated them, to actually have an extermination of the Native Americans, a genocide, because they thought they were not a superior people like themselves, because of what the Bible taught. We have groups like the KKK that have come up in this country because they felt they were doing a Christian good by their interpretation of the Bible.
The problem
And
with
this is the problem.
The problem is that is not a universal Christian teaching, those cases that you're talking about.
I understand
Those
that.
are specific Christians and regions of the world that use the Bible to support something, but that is not a universal Christian teaching.
But the
That is
thing
not
is, when you
something
use-
that all Christians all over the world have always believed, like the Apostles' Creed. There is no creed that Christians stand up in the church every Sunday and say, I believe in God the Father Almighty. Oh, and I believe you should hold slaves. This is not a teaching of Christianity. This is something that different groups have interpreted the Bible. Now, but the point being, the Bible can be interpreted differently. Yes, I agree with you. But the point is that in Christianity and all the monotheistic religions of the world, there is a transcendent source of truth. And we have a God who is judge and he gives rights and wrongs. And we have a reference point outside of the earth, outside of ourselves, outside of humanity, that can give us absolute rights and wrongs. Now, if you're an atheist, you cannot make a categorically absolute statement about any moral thing. For example, you cannot say in absolute terms that Adolf Hitler is any different than Mother Teresa because you have no transcendent standard to make that judgment. The only thing you can say if you're an atheist is, I don't think Adolf Hitler should have done what he did, but I think Mother Teresa was good in doing what she did. But I can't make that categorical judgment because I have no absolute basis for that. That's the only thing you can say. Is that not true?
I think the fellows on my left here have it on this argument. I just wonder why it is that when they see the KKK, they say, well, all you Christians are like that. But when they see the Muslims, they say, well, they're not all terrorists.
Right, and I think we can make a distinction between what a specific religion believes and what certain sects and groups within that religion see or practice or interpret the Bible or Quran or whatever they're talking about. But on the issue of absolute morality, would you not agree that if you do not have a standard that is outside of humanity, you have no fixed reference point upon which to judge ultimately true and false.
You're asking me a question?
Yeah.
Well, it sounded like you were expressing a tautology. Myself, I'm a moral absolutist. I don't really care enough, and I'm not intelligent enough to know the philosophy or the origins of morality. But like the Supreme Court says, I know it when I see it. And I'm pretty harsh and confident and absolutist and unforgiving when it comes to that.
So ultimately for you,
I don't know where it comes from.
I know it when I see it, you're grounding it within your own self.
Apparently. I don't really,
Now,
I
do
don't
you
really
see
know. I don't really
do you
care.
see the problem with that? Because another fellow
Well,
can
that's
come
no
up
problem for me. Yeah, I can see other
for
people.
society. I mean, because for example, Adolf Hitler and the Germans could come to you and say, "Well, we feel deeply about our values, and one of our values is to exterminate the Jews." And you hold a very strongly belief that that's wrong, but if you were a German and followed Adolf Hitler, you might have a very strong, heartfelt belief that that was valid to do what they did. So how would you say to them that they should stop killing Jews, or that that was wrong to kill the Jews?
Well, I'll tell you, I don't know that. I have been president of the Wallenberg Committee for several years and vice president for decades. So I'm very concerned and in tune with the issue of the Holocaust. I also believe, like George Washington, that it's in general, all things, other things being equal, a bad idea for America to meddle in the internal affairs of foreign countries. If I had been alive in 1939, 1940, the information, I wouldn't have the hindsight. I wouldn't have the value of hindsight. I don't know what I would have thought. I don't know what my opinions would have been. And I very well could have been in a dilemma where I couldn't decide. I recognize that I have neither the virtue nor the intelligence to answer all moral questions. But I can answer a lot of them. And I think I do a lot better than most of the other people I know. And I'm pretty content with that.
I think what it boils down to is an atheist would then have to basically sort of follow some kind of a tradition. Now, you can be a conservative atheist and sort of believe in the philosophy of conservatism, where you believe in the values, enduring values of the past, and you would make your values on the basis of that. Or you could be a progressive atheist who feels that maybe values are plastic and that they're changeable. I mean, we've seen that in the last couple of years with same-sex marriage. I mean, 5 years ago, they were talking about civil partnerships. Now it's same-sex marriage. What brought society? I mean, if you're progressive and you're an atheist, you believe that values are plastic and you can shape them whatever is needed for society at the
Well, I
time.
don't, but most do.
Getting back to the Adolf Hitler thing and the Holocaust you were talking about, my question is, wasn't Germany considered a Christian nation also?
It has a Christian heritage, a strong
Now,
Lutheran
Hitler
Christian.
was considered Christian.
Oh, no.
He was a Catholic, Norm.
No.
He was considered Christian. But now, grant the
Well-
fact that he diverted from a lot of the teachings of Christianity, but that whole Nazism thing became a cult.
He was a Machiavellian politician.
That one was under belt.
He would be anything he needed to be
Yeah.
But
to do what he needed to
The
do.
point I'm getting at was they were a Christian nation, supposedly. They all fell under the cult of Nazism.
That's right.
And it was a cult, like there's many cults in this country of religions. So when you ask that question, if you lived in in Germany at the time, well, that, most of those people there didn't consider themselves in a cult of Hitler. They considered themselves average, everyday Christians, whatever belief they had, Catholic, Protestant, whatever they had over there.
Well, that's an example. That's an example of the relativism that is inherent in all forms of godless ethics, because if you don't have a fixed transcendent standard, or you don't follow one, those Christians in Germany, they had a heritage of transcendent moral values of right and wrong. They allowed a leader to steer them away from that, and they begin to follow this man-made value system. Basically, whatever the Führer wanted was the truth, and they followed.
I get a little tired of you saying they have this transcendent. Where is the Bible? Is that what you're saying? I'm asking. Does the Bible here transcendent reference to
the source of the transcendent values is God.
Well, God talks to you? Revelation, is that
And the means by which we know his values, the means is the Bible.
And we've already shown that they've changed in the Bible. You said, oh, it's okay, that's an interpretation. How are you supposed to know how to interpret it?
Well, I'm not going to get into the specifics. I'm just
Well,
going to
let's
say...
You have no more moral grounding than anyone else.
Well,
Which came from man 2,000 years ago or 4,000 years ago, and maybe atheists are ongoing. Plastic, as you said.
well, that would be a good topic for another discussion on, is the Bible a revelation from God? Because that's a huge topic, and we don't have anywhere near the time to open that up.
If it isn't a revelation from God, then it's man.
Okay,
right?
well, for the sake of argument tonight, let's assume the Christian position that there is revelation in the Bible, and the revelation comes from God. Let's just assume that. Okay, because we can't prove the Bible tonight, and we can't even open that topic up.
If, for purposes of argument, we grant the gentleman to my left their position, then the question is between your moral system that is based on eons of experience and homing and evolution, and theirs that is based on conceit and personal incentives. So it doesn't
I don't
matter
quite
to me-
follow you on that one.
It doesn't matter to me whether a moral system is ascribed to a prophet, a philosopher, or a political scientist. That to me has nothing to do with whether it's good or bad. But I think...
But it does have something to do with the source. If it's not from God, it's not transcendent, right?
That's why I don't agree, but I prefer
And so
a
then-
system that's tried and
Right.
succeeded
Yes.
better than any in history.
So your argument would be more
over
of the
conceits
wisdom of the
liberals
ages. Yes, okay.
and reformers and so-called new morality advocates, new contemporary morality being the greatest oxymoron the English language has ever conceived. Followed closely by Christian rock.
Well, I agree with you, as you as an atheist and myself as a Christian, I would agree with you that what is happening today, I think we can both agree, is totally dangerous and harmful for society, where you have morality being, basically opinion poll morality.
I hate it. I hate
And then one group says, see, 51% believe in this moral value now, so this is okay. And then 5 years from now, it's different. This is really harmful for society. But anyway, we get off the point. That's another good topic we could talk about. So anyway, my point is that, and I know you don't all accept it, but my second point is that without an ultimate transcendent source of morality, you get what William Provine, and Mel quoted him as saying, there is no grounding for right and wrong and moral ethical standards. Now, the third shocking belief of atheism is that there are no ultimate answers to the most profound questions of life. Now, a lot of atheists have a lot to say, but they don't usually say this. They don't say that they don't have all the answers. They usually try to say that they have all the answers, but what it comes down to is what Richard Dawkins usually does during his lectures. And he basically tells people, stop trying to raise questions about ultimate meaning and purpose. He says those are silly questions. I don't think they're silly questions. When a kid in school asks the teacher, yeah, but why are we here on earth? And Richard Dawkins says to him, don't ask that question. It's pointless. It's meaningless. It's without purpose. Or if you ask yourself, what's the purpose of my life? Why am I here? What am I supposed to do? According to an atheist, you must conclude from your beliefs that there is no point or purpose of your life. The whole universe came into existence, they say, 14 to 15 billion years ago. It happened with a big bang. We're the product of a collision of atoms. We are not the result of any premeditated plan or purpose or intention of a creator, according to the atheists. And you are here because you happen to be lucky enough to have emerged from a natural process that didn't have you in mind. Here is what Bertrand Russell says. And this is what I wish atheists would come out and say, because they don't say it very often. Here is what Bertrand Russell, a great atheist of the last century, said. That man is the product of causes which had no provision of the end they were achieving, that his origins, his growth, his hopes, his fears, his loves, his beliefs are but the outcome of an accidental collision of atoms, that no fire, no heroism, no intensity of thought or feeling can preserve an individual life beyond the grave. If you look at atheism starkly and honestly and bluntly, you are a worthless object. You are no more valuable than an ant or a slug or a worm or a bacteria.
Who said you?
Because in the grand scheme of things, there's nothing that gives you any kind of worth. You are just what you are because nature produced you. Now that's the reality of atheism. And I wish we would know that when the new atheists go lecturing and they're all enthused about atheism, when it all comes down to it, man is a nothing. It dehumanizes men and women because there's no value or context for their life.
I have to disagree with you on that statement.
Which point?
The statement you make that as an atheist we don't put any value on anything.
No, not that you don't put value, that there is value supremely.
The point of the matter is, even for an atheist, they feel, their life they spend here on this planet is to try to embetter other people, to try to embetter themselves, their family, to try to educate people, not to show racism, not to show hate, not to go out and kill other people or murder other people. These are moral things that all atheists have. I know quite a few of them, and I would trust them more than some Christians I have known in my life. And to say that we have no more value than a slug or a worm, I mean, that's insulting.
Well, put it this way.
If I said that about Christians, just what you just said, there would be an uproar in this country.
Well, I'm not saying that atheists are of no more value than a slug or a worm. I'm saying that from the atheistic principles, mankind is no more valuable than a bacteria or a rat or a worm or anything. They're all creatures that nature produced, right?
You're both right, you're saying two different things.
Yes, okay, now I begin to see what the point you're trying to bring out. You have to excuse me, sometimes I'm a little thick.
I think what you're committing the crime of speciesism, as they say in the postmodern era. You're elevating your species above others, and within atheism there is no basis for doing that. So you're valuing human beings more than, say, a worm, but you have no basis for that.
I kind of object to that thinking too, to a point. And the point is because of thinking that we're so, as a human in the Christian religion, that we're more superior than everything else on this earth. That's why we see such horrible mistreatment of animals and everything else, the environment and everything else, because of our superior thinking. And that, I think that is totally wrong also. If you look at the scriptures, what they have to say, mistreatment of all these things is just as bad, but yet it takes place because people think they're superior over everything else.
Well, the Bible does teach that men and women are made in the image of their Creator. And they have been put here as a steward of the earth. So they have responsibilities. And so we have a basis, transcendent basis again for our worth. And we can say, based on the transcendent values that God gives through the Bible, that we are more valuable than, say, a worm or a bacteria. But if you don't believe in transcendent values outside of this earth and you believe only in the natural process, then you cannot say that man is more valuable. You can believe it personally because you are a human, but you can't say it objectively. You can only say, well, I favor my own species. But there's no basis
Doesn't
for it.
Ecclesiastes bring out that there's the same eventuality to all man and animals?
And have more respect for the liberal notion that it's wrong for us to feel that our sex, our nation, our race is superior if they didn't feel that their ideology and the adherents, the members of their ideology were so superior.
Oh, so you're saying there's some hypocrisy there.
And I'm saying it's certain, let's call it a paradox. We won't
Okay.
be so rude as to say it's hypocrisy. Although I have sometimes lost my manners.
Okay. Well, so those are the 3 points, and I know that some of you don't like those points, and you would want to contest with me over those points. But I think that if I can get you to think about those 3 points, and you begin to see that atheism is a dark, nihilistic, ultimately despairing philosophy if you reflect on its implications. Now, if you are going through life like Richard Dawkins did and said, I have meaning, I have purpose, I have hope for the future, I'm hoping for a really wonderful lunch coming up here in a couple hours. If you want to go through life like that, then you can float over Niagara Falls like a ping pong ball, as they say. But if you really think about atheism, and you really take it serious, and you really try to live out the values and beliefs of the philosophy, you will probably end up like Nietzsche, driving yourself insane, because you won't have any ultimate purpose in life, you won't have any foundation for morality, you won't have any answers to the most profound questions of life. Richard Dawkins told you don't even think about those. So you won't think about those. Or if you do think about them, you'll be very depressed. You'll be very nihilistic. And one of the areas of society we see this happening today is with our young people. the philosophers and the adult atheists can get along without cracking up or going crazy, but a lot of the teenagers who are being taught and are being fed this, they act out on their beliefs. And you see a very dark, developing cloud in our country of the youth who don't have transcendent moral values. There is no God looking over their shoulder, and so they say, I'll do whatever I want to do.
Sir, where's this being taught at?
It's being taught in the universities and colleges,
But they're now young adults, they're not children.
and it's often being taught in high schools, public high schools.
What's being taught in high schools? Atheism.
Yeah, atheism. Jamestown Public High School teaches atheism.
Where? I know in Warren County, that's like the furthest word they would ever have in a school there.
As an example, I was browsing in a used bookstore in the area here, and I saw a book by Richard Dawkins. Richard Dawkins. And I pulled it off the shelf, and it was a good price, so I wound up buying it because I wanted to read up. And on the front page, lo and behold, is a Jamestown High School sticker, stamp. And I thought, oh, this was an assigned book by somebody, and the student had it and read it and turned it in for the used book sale. But
What book was it?
it was The Blind Watchmaker.
That's not a book about atheism. It's not a book about atheism.
Okay.
Well, would it be
It's
about,
not a book about atheism.
Well,
It's a book about evolution.
the introduction of the book says basically, quotes a biologist who says, religion and philosophy has always tackled the greatest questions of life, but since Charles Darwin, all of those questions have been swept away, and we shouldn't even bother asking them. That was the preface of the book. So, children in high school and college, they're not children by the time they get to college, but children in the public schools are being exposed to atheism, and I'm really sad to think of what's going to happen in the years ahead, unless there is some kind of a revival in belief in God and His values. I'm really fearful for our country.
I can't talk about high school and elementary school other than that when you forbid any mention of Christmas or Easter, that I don't know what the gentleman on my left call that, but it looks like something along the lines of what you were saying. But I can say that a woman I know that went to JCC as an adult, who was a very sincere Baptist, and who is as meek and mild a person and as good a student and as exemplary in class as you could ask for, that she was belittled and insulted and publicly humiliated by professors, and that she said that all of her Baptist nieces that went to JCC had that same experience.
Yeah, and I totally believe that. Well, I'm going to close here, and what I'm going to end on is just a couple minutes here is when I was in college, we read books by atheists because I was a philosophy major. One of the major atheist philosophers and writers at the time that I was in college was a man named Anthony Flew. And this man is world famous. If you were to list the top articulate atheists of the 20th century, Anthony Flew would be on the list, at least probably in the top 10. He's written so many books on atheism. Well, lo and behold, a few years before he died, he became a believer in God. And the thing that got him to believe in the existence of God from a whole lifetime of atheism and a philosophical and a sophisticated atheism was the argument from intelligent design. The argument that the universe and the earth and our solar system and life on earth is so fitted for us as humans that it could not possibly be a product of time and chance. And so this argument convinced a lifelong, sophisticated, world-famous atheist that God exists. And I want to just leave you with that question. Can you actually believe that our planet, Earth, just happened to get thrown into an orbit that just is perfectly fitted for life? Can you believe that maybe if it was just a little bit closer to the sun, we'd burn up, and that if it was a little further away, we'd all freeze? But it's right there, smack dab in the perfect spot it should be for human beings to exist. Now, I believe it's more reasonable to believe that there is an intelligent mind that made that orbit of the Earth the exact perfect placement for us as human beings to live. I believe that's more reasonable than an atheist believing that that orbit of the Earth just happens to be in the right spot by chance.
I wish you Christians would stop making that argument because I like you. You are shooting yourself in the foot. That is the most naive and absurd argument that you could make with the uncounted quintillions and septillions and decillions of stars there are in the universe, and many of them having planets around them. Every single configuration and distance and size of planet and variety of atmosphere that can physically exist does physically exist. Not once, but innumerable amount of times. It would be impossible to avoid some of them being in a life-favorable zone. And to me, I think the best illustration of this argument from design is parodied in there used to be a cartoon strip in the Post-Journal, Frank and Ernie. I love that cartoon, a couple of disheveled guys. And they were standing one day in the lobby of the CIA building. And they were looking at the directory, and here's this big arrow, and it says, "You are here." And Frank says to Ernie, "Well, they certainly keep track of you, don't they?" A self-selecting sample is no indication of probability. We are alive here because we are in a place where life can exist. We are a self-selecting sample. Only positives report on self-selecting
Well,
samples.
that's an interesting theory that you hold, but
No, that's not theory,
the argument from intelligent design convinced Anthony Flew, who gave his life to writing and promoting philosophical, intellectual atheism at the highest level. Intelligent design convinced him that what you just said is not valid. And so I just leave you with that. I just leave you with that. Evidently, the argument was strong enough for him.
Can't you see I'm right?
No, I see that you hold a theory about the universe
With a near infinite, or
that is
perhaps
impossible to verify.
with a near infinite or perhaps infinite 4 different ways, number of planets in the universe, around an infinite number of stars, how could one or many not be in the favorable life zone? How could there not be many, many, many of those with the right diameter and gravity that would be amenable to liquid water? How can it not be true? And why? And here we are, you know, and you can't argue that you can't argue against the point that only positives report in a self-selecting sample.
Well, I understand the theory that you're propounding.
Wait a minute, what is wrong? What other way?
The assumptions you have to make to get to the
Are you
theory.
saying that that it's possible that there could not be other planets that are favorable for life?
No, I'm not questioning that there
Well, then what is your
couldn't
point?
be. My point is that in order to get to the conclusion you come to, you have to make statistical assumptions. Statistically, I think the statisticians would refute your argument.
Wait a minute, you want to put a little bet on that?
Because that's what Nietzsche said. Nietzsche said anything is possible in an infinite possible range.
Let's